Okay, guys, as some of you know, I'm using ChatGPT AI to make my sports betting picks on DraftKings. I started with $100. I won $200, withdrew 120 or 220 of it, and now we're sitting here with the principal balance approximately 178. Apologize if the math doesn't math, but that's basically what happened. You know what I mean? So now I'm playing with the house money being 178 approximately, and I made two more bets, $5 a piece each. My risk is always going to be like 3.33% of the total principal, so that even if I lose, it's not a huge chunk of the principal, and usually my winning percentage is pretty good, so it just keeps on snowballing. Even though it's slower, I'd rather have minimal risk than a lot of risk and a lot of gains, but wipes out my whole entire balance, you know what I mean? So I used ChatGPT to make two bets, and the first bet I made was for a fight coming up in December 7th, and that's between Merab Dvalishvili and Peter Yan. And they fought once before. The first fight was back in November 2023, something like that, but it was definitely 2023. Maybe it was July, I don't remember. But basically, from what ChatGPT said and from what I remember of that fight, Peter Yan had stuffed so many of Merab's takedowns, and basically Peter Yan still has one of the highest takedown defenses in the UFC, and he has great striking. ChatGPT said he had good defensive striking. From what I can see of his fighting style, that seems to be the case. It seems to be true. But basically, Merab is definitely the machine. That's his nickname, the machine, Dvalishvili, because even though he might not be the most technical, even in training, even if he loses in training, when he gets into the ring, he turns into a machine. He turns into a cardio and strength beast. And not only that, he still has skills, you know what I mean? He has elite level skills. They're just unpolished compared to his competition, you know what I mean? But that being said, somehow when he gets in the ring, he just becomes a powerful beast, an unstoppable force. It's basically like an immovable object, which is Peter Yan, versus an unstoppable force, which is Merab. So why did I choose Peter Yan? First of all, I always like choosing the underdogs, and I always like choosing the underdogs with the highest percentage or probability of winning. And that's because not only do they pay out the best, and not only do you have a good chance of winning, but I always like to pick the ones that on paper, on the books, they don't have a shot. Like, you know, statistically, they might have like 23% shot, 40% shot compared to 60% or 80%. But me knowing MMA, me knowing how training goes, me knowing some of the fighters, I can kind of tell which one might have the odds, you know? And you're almost always like playing Nostradamus. You're like kind of psychically looking into the future and seeing it how it is instead of like going all in on logic, you know what I mean? It's like that balance of EQ and IQ. So that's why I'm using ChatGPT, because they have information that I don't know about, but I also want to, you know, find the best odds too with the underdogs. So that's going to be, you know, my outlook on this, and that's why I chose Peter Yan, because on paper, like everybody, all the bookmakers are going to say, oh, Merab is definitely going to wipe him out. But I know that Peter Yan has the skills, and he's going to potentially, you know, make it an even more competitive fight than what most people think. So I think that Peter Yan has a great shot. Of course, Merab is definitely powerful. He's on top, but I think Peter Yan has a shot of winning it. So we'll see. But today I want to talk about Dan Hooker versus Arman Tsarukyan. And this is definitely like this is definitely like the fight before, like I mentioned, Merab versus Peter. Everybody is saying that Arman is going to win. He's going to smother Dan with his wrestling. But the reason why I chose Dan is because I think that first Armin is going to cut a lot of weight. And there's something about, like, even though he has, like, the best wrestling training, he's so rich that he can afford the best training in the world, the best food in the world. It's not, I don't feel like it's sitting right. And plus, last time he pulled out of a fight because he had a back injury. And I feel like that might have been caused because of the massive the massive weight cutting, which causes you to dehydrate really quickly and, like, basically have a lot of back spasms. I think that may be what happened last time. So I wanted to consider that into the mix. And also, Dan definitely has the way better striking. So it was a toss-up. I feel like Dan Hooker is going to have problems on the ground. Armin's definitely going to want to try to smother him on the ground. That's basically Dan's weakness. But I feel like Dan Hooker has a shot against Armin because it's just overall technique. I feel like he's technically better, but Armin has all the resources. So I feel like Dan Hooker has a good shot. He might lose. I'm not as confident as in the Peter Yan fight, but that's why I chose Dan Hooker, is because he's the massive underdog. It's a plus 410 odd. I have a big chance of winning a lot of money if he wins. So that's what I chose. We'll see how it plays out. See you at the fights.